The Paternal Suit is an exhibition that spans the 400 years of American history, really. The collection has in it about 100 objects that are displayed, and has artifacts and paintings and costumes and prints and newspaper clippings and all sorts of things that help to propel this story forward. They are gained from many different sources, some perhaps questionable, but history is questionable. In my research, I started finding objects that had to do with the family and started acquiring them. One of the earliest is the Texas correspondent box of R.T. Patton, my great-grandfather. He went to Texas writing for newspapers in New York. He came back from Texas an alcoholic, much to his mother and father's disgrace. So this was a box made by Cornelius Josephson, who was one of his bunk buddies. And inside you find things that even today would still be probably very useful in Texas. These puppets are part of a 495-piece set that Henry Dollop built, and he formed Dollop's Congressional Theater of Serious Comedy. My ancestor here, Alfred Iverson, was a pretty well-known orator. So, he used him quite a bit. Certainly Abraham Lincoln was used quite a bit. Didn't have a beard, but after he became president, he painted the beard on there. He liked to use Lincoln a lot because in life he was somewhat funny. So as a puppet, he was even funnier. Within the space of about 2 generations in South Carolina, my ancestors went from being Puritans in the Massachusetts sense to being very rich plantation owners in the Southern sense. I mean, they were the classic plantation owners of the South.
Was 3 children from the land of Israel. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego took a little trip to the land of Babylon. Shadrach,
I do have an object from that period. William Baker was the deacon of the church there, the church still stands. It was burned down by the British, but they rebuilt it just after the Revolutionary War. So this is the deacon staff of William Baker, one of my ancestors there. And this deacon staff still works, still has its shaming purpose, I think, pretty effectively.
Cinnamon, your heart is like steel. Cinnamon, your heart is like steel.
This is a pastry tray that's been painted by African-American artist Naomi Washington. She died about 1950, 1951, but her grandparents were slaves, and they happen to have been owned by my great-great-grandfather. Naomi Washington was really an amazing artist. She had a really tough life, however. She married a man named Amos Washington, who had a restaurant in Washington, D.C., and she started on her art career by painting on plates and things for fun using food. Naomi got a little bit of a following, especially during the suffragette era in the 20s in her sort of proto-feminist plates. She also had a lover, a white lover from New York, a woman. It's been largely discounted that the woman she was having an affair with was Eleanor Roosevelt. And this plate bears a remarkable resemblance, really, to Eleanor Roosevelt. This is the jacket of my great-great-grandfather, Brigadier General Alfred Iverson. He ended up facing off against Sherman for his entire march through Georgia, his famous March to the Sea, and then against him in South Carolina and North Carolina, too, until the very end of the war. There was a veterans camp down there, and they named it Camp Iverson. They named it after him. And they had all sorts of banners and paraphernalia from the war, and they kept that stored in the barn where they were meeting. This happened to be a Brahma bull farm, and there's a funny thing that happens with the intestines of a Brahma bull. There's a lysozymes in there that cause this gas to rise. So, the manure of these cows, combined with the humidity and the heat of Florida, it caused the fibers of this jacket to grow. So this coat is much larger than most of the coats you see from that era. The paternal suit began on a psychological level with the loss of my father. I started drawing when I was 7 years old. My parents got divorced. My father took off. After the age of 10, I didn't see him. But during that period, I started drawing naked ladies tied up. The very first image I remember drawing at that time was of a woman in a bikini tied to a chair in jail. I realized in my 20s that what I was doing was binding the woman, binding the mother, so she wouldn't leave too, and that had been this consistent theme because my father had taken off. I was going to magically control my mother through art. So that's how my art career really began. I got very good at drawing out these fantasies that were all erotic, and so that led to college. I got to like the art of Vienna and fantastic realists, and I decided I wanted to go there and be an artist. Started living in Austria as an artist. A few months into it, I thought I should show some of these fantastic realists my artwork, and I took my portfolio to the Academy of Fine Art, to Rudolf Hausner's Meisterschule. And I showed him, and he flipped, said, "Oh, this is fantastic stuff." And he bought one on the spot for $500 and said, "When are you going to start studying with me?" I said, "I can't turn this down." So I ended up staying at the Academy of Fine Art in Vienna for 5.5 years. Lived in Vienna for 6. Got tired of being in Vienna. I was getting homesick for the States. I'd never been to Los Angeles, but I had a girlfriend who was a filmmaker, and so we moved to LA. And my career took off here. I've continuously made figurative art, and all the way until now. I feel that this exhibition sort of pulls together all my skills in many ways, and so the Paternal Suit is related in some way to that missing father. After 32 years, I was kind of curious as to where my father was, so I tracked him down. And he had some information about the family, but not very much. And it wasn't until 5 years later that I got an email with a photograph by Matthew Brady of my great-great-great-grandfather, who was a senator. And it was just, I just looked at that thing, and ever since that moment, I have been hooked. In a way, what you're doing with genealogy, and especially if you've got an imagination like mine, you reanimate people. You bring them back to life, and they exist almost literally. There's always questions of authenticity. You go into any historical epic and start to read the newspapers, and they have countering ideas, and then you start to read books about it, and everything shifts subtly and changes. The history can be pretty amazing, so art and life mix in strange ways. In going through this exhibition, or like any exhibition, people should be skeptical of any of the objects. The paternal suit is swollen by myth and impossible to wear. As you dig into history, you find that a lot of history is stretched and warped and mythologized. Some of the things found, were they really used by that person when they were dug up? Who knows, but they were found in the right place. They're the right kind of object to fit, but, is that gun barrel actually from the gun of, Andrew Hampton? Who knows? I have here a piece by Lamar Rankin. This is the death mask of Alfred Iverson. I keep searching his face to see if there's any real family resemblance here. I don't really I don't see it, but maybe some other people would. I don't know. What do you think?